I eased my rig onto the off-ramp just as the sun dipped low, bathing the highway in a molten orange glow. After 20 years behind the wheel, I've come to love that time of day, when the road home stretches out like a promise and the sky looks as tired as I feel. I downshifted and felt the familiar rumble of the engine through my arms. Home was just a few miles ahead in Greenville, a mid-sized dot on the map where everyone waves at each other and my own family waited for me. The town's welcome sign flashed by, and soon I was navigating the quieter streets toward our neighborhood. I glanced at the digital clock on the dash, 6:47 p.m., right on schedule. My wife, Marcia, liked to tease that I ran on trucker time, always precise, always dependable. I tried to be. A professional driver doesn't miss deadlines, whether it's a freight delivery or dinner with the family on Friday night. As I pulled up in front of our modest two-story house on Sycamore Lane, I spotted our youngest, Evan, bouncing a basketball on the driveway. At 9 years old, he was all skinny limbs and energy. The moment he saw my truck, he dropped the ball and sprinted towards me, shouting, "Dad's home!" at the top of his lungs. I barely had time to cut the engine and climb down before he barreled into me for a hug. "I missed you, buddy," I laughed, ruffling his sandy hair. A warmth spread through my chest as I looked down at him. No matter how many times I come back from a run, that enthusiastic welcome never gets old. Our middle child, Ashley, appeared in the front doorway next, rolling her teenage eyes but smiling despite herself. At 15, she was in that delicate dance between childhood and adulthood, but she could never quite hide her excitement when I returned. She hung back, thumbs tapping on her phone, pretending to be aloof. "Hey, Dad," she called out casually, as if she hadn't been peeking out the window waiting. "Hey, sweet pea," I replied, picking up my duffel bag from the cab. I slung an arm around Evan's shoulders and walked up the path with him. The porch light was on, casting a welcoming glow as dusk settled. Marcia stood in the doorway beside our daughter, one hand resting on the doorframe. The sight of my wife after a long haul always gave me a little flutter. Her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, a few strands framing that gentle face. She wore jeans and one of my old flannel shirts against the evening chill, sleeves rolled up. At 45, she had a warmth to her that I'd fallen in love with decades ago in high school, and it hadn't faded. We'd been married for 22 years, and she was still as beautiful to me as the day I said I do. "You're a little late," she teased softly as I came up the steps. The hint of a smile curved her lips. "Traffic on Route 6 was backed up," I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. She smelled like home, a mix of fresh laundry and the subtle vanilla of her favorite lotion. "But I made it." She stepped aside to let me and Evan in. "Dinner's just about ready. I kept it warm for you." Inside, the house embraced me with its familiar comforts. The aroma of roast chicken, the low hum of the dishwasher, the clatter of plates as Ashley set the table. I took a deep breath and felt the tension of the road melt off my shoulders. This was my favorite part of any trip. Crossing that threshold and knowing I could relax, if only for a weekend, with the people I loved most. Our eldest, Daniel, was away at college this semester, but his framed school photo on the mantle watched over us with a grin. I made a mental note to text him later that night to let him know I was home. At 19, he pretended not to worry about his old man on the road, but he always asked how the drive went. I washed up in the kitchen sink, scrubbing the road dust from my hands. Marcia handed me a cold glass of iced tea, condensation beading on the sides. "Thanks, hun," I said, meeting her brown eyes. For a split second, I noticed they looked a bit tired, or perhaps distant. But the next moment she smiled and the thought slipped away. We gathered around the worn oak dining table that had seen 15 years of family meals, laughter, and the occasional argument. I carved into the chicken while Evan chattered about his Little League practice and a new video game he wanted. Ashley mentioned, in a tone of forced nonchalance, an upcoming school dance. I caught Marcia's eye and we shared a subtle grin. Our middle child, who insisted on being so grown up, still wanted her dad's input on which dress color looked best. All through dinner, I felt a contentment that bordered on blissful. My life was not fancy or extraordinary. I drove 18-wheelers across state lines for a living, often gone 3 or 4 nights a week hauling goods for Western Freight. It was hard work, sometimes lonely, but it paid the bills. And coming home to this, a hearty meal, Marcia's hand brushing mine as she passed the salad, the kids' banter, made every mile worth it. After we ate, I helped clear the table. "And how was the week?" I asked Marcia as we stood side by side at the sink, the faucet running hot over the dishes. She shrugged lightly. Same old, same old. Work was hectic, and the kids kept me on my toes. She worked part-time as an office manager at a local logistics company, which was ironic given I practically lived in a truck. Oh, and Evan's teacher wants to meet us next week for a conference. Nothing bad, she added quickly at my concerned look. Just routine. I nodded, making a mental note of it. As I handed her a wet plate to dry, I noticed she seemed a little fidgety. Normally, we'd chat more about our days, but tonight she was quiet. Her gaze was fixed on the soapy water and she was biting her lower lip, something she did when deep in thought. Tired? I asked, nudging her gently with my elbow. She blinked, then gave me a quick smile. Yeah, a bit. It's been a long week. I couldn't blame her for being tired. She did the heavy lifting at home while I was out on the road, juggling work, school pickups, and 1,000 other things. Why don't you sit down? I'll finish up here, I offered. No, I got it, she said, but she did look grateful for the offer. I studied her for a moment, noticing faint shadows under her eyes. Guilt pricked at me. Maybe I had been away too much lately. Western Freight had been piling on extra routes, and I'd been taking them, thinking of the overtime pay that would help with Daniel's tuition. We'd agreed on it, Marcia and I, but still, being apart 5 days a week was rough on a marriage. We'd always considered ourselves solid, but I knew it wasn't easy. After the kitchen was tidy, I settled into my recliner in the living room. Evan was already begging me to watch a movie with him and show off the new trucks in his toy collection. Ashley retreated to her room with her phone, as teens do. And Marcia? She curled up on the opposite end of the couch, absent-mindedly folding laundry while the TV played the opening credits of a family-friendly comedy. As Evan described each toy truck's stats to me, I glanced over at my wife. She smiled at something on the screen, but there was a distance in her demeanor, as if part of her mind was elsewhere. Every marriage has ebbs and flows, I reminded myself. After so many years, it's easy to fall into routines and silences. Perhaps we were just in a rut, me on the road, her at home. We'd make time to reconnect. Maybe I'd take next weekend off and plan a day trip for just the two of us, like we used to. For now, I pushed aside any lingering worries. I had a rare night with my family, a roof over my head, and a good job that kept us comfortable. Life was, by all accounts, good. I couldn't have imagined on that peaceful evening that the foundation of my world was already shifting under my feet, that cracks had begun to form in the life I took such pride in. If I had known, maybe I would have paid more attention to the faraway look in my wife's eyes. Maybe I would have asked her what was really on her mind. But I didn't know. So I laughed at the silly movie with my son, held my wife's hand across the couch, and went to bed that night feeling like a lucky man. Chapter 2. Flickers of Doubt. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, the late summer sun filtering through our bedroom curtains. I woke to the sound of cartoons playing softly downstairs. Evan was up early as usual. Marcia's side of the bed was already empty. I could smell coffee brewing. I stretched, feeling the slight ache in my back from yesterday's long drive, and headed to the kitchen. I found my wife standing at the counter in her robe, buttering toast while scrolling on her phone. She looked up and gave me a warm, if somewhat distracted smile. Good morning. Coffee's fresh. Morning. I poured a mug and savored the first hot sip, leaning against the counter next to her. Outside, the sound of a lawnmower droned as one of our neighbors started their Saturday yard work. Inside, it felt peaceful. Ashley wasn't up yet, likely sleeping in. Evan sat cross-legged on the living room rug in his pajamas, transfixed by animated superheroes saving the world. I joined my son on the couch and we watched TV together for a while, chuckling at the silly jokes. It was nice, a slow Saturday with nowhere to be. As a trucker, I often felt like I was living life at 65 miles an hour, but on weekends like this I could finally coast. At one point, the cartoon cut to a commercial break advertising a new ice cream parlor in town, featuring kids laughing over dripping cones of bright blue flavor. This caught Evan's attention. He turned to me with an excited chirp. Dad, have you been to Millie's Creamery yet? It's so good. Mom took me there on Wednesday after school. I glanced down at him. Wednesday, huh? You mean when I was out on the road? Yeah, he nodded vigorously. We went with her friend from work, Mr. Brandon. He bought me a double scoop. Evan's face lit up at the memory. My mind snagged on that piece of information. Millie's Creamery was a new place across town. I hadn't heard of it until now. More importantly, Mom's friend from work, Brandon? I tried to keep my tone light. Uh-huh, Evan said, eyes back on the TV. He came over to our house first, and then we all went for ice cream. He has a cool red car and he knows a lot about video games. He showed me some cheat codes while Mom was getting ready. I felt the coffee turn to acid in my stomach. A friend from work came over to the house while I was away. This was news to me. I kept my voice casual for Evan's sake. That sounds fun. Did Ashley go too? Evan shook his head, not taking his eyes off the returning cartoon. No, she was at soccer practice, just me, Mom, and Mr. Brandon. I managed a smile, reaching out to tousle his hair. Lucky you, getting double scoops? Inside, my thoughts were spinning. Who was this Brandon? I mentally combed through the names of Marcia's co-workers I knew of. She'd occasionally mentioned a few office colleagues, a Carol here, a Mike there, but never a Brandon that I recalled. A knot of unease started to form in my chest. It wasn't unusual for coworkers to be friends, but to take our son out for ice cream together to come to our house? I stood up, carrying my empty coffee mug back to the kitchen. Marcia was wiping down the counter. She looked up as I approached, and I searched her face for any sign of, well, I wasn't sure what. Guilt? Anxiety? She seemed calm enough, but perhaps a bit guarded when she met my eyes. I leaned on the counter casually. So, Millie's Creamery, huh? I hear it's great, I said, keeping my tone even. Her hand stilled on the damp dishcloth for a half second before she resumed wiping an invisible spot. Oh yeah, it just opened. I took Evan the other day after school. With someone from your work? I added, pretending to fix my attention on rinsing out my mug in the sink. Yes, she replied lightly. Brandon. He's new at the company. A project manager. He offered to help me with a software issue on our home computer, so he stopped by. And since we finished up around Evan's snack time, we decided to all go get a treat. It was a last-minute thing. She delivered the explanation smoothly, almost too offhand. There was a slight stiffness in her shoulders, though. I nodded slowly, turning off the faucet. I see, that was nice of him, helping you out. Everything okay with the computer now? It's fine, she said quickly, folding the dishcloth. It was just a minor thing. I sensed she was eager to change the subject. Before I could ask anything else, she tossed the cloth onto the sink's edge and stepped closer to peck my cheek. I'm going to get dressed. Maybe later we can take the kids to the park or something? Sure, I murmured. As she left the kitchen, I stood there for a moment, mug in hand, staring into the drain. Something about her tone didn't sit right with me. And that pause when I first mentioned ice cream. Brief, but telling. I'd known Marcia for the better part of my life. I could read her little tics and hesitations. I tried to shake it off. It could be nothing. She had a coworker I hadn't met yet. He helped with the computer. Innocent enough, right? And yet, why not mention it to me at all? We'd talked about our week last night somewhat. She never said a word about someone dropping by. If it was innocent, why wouldn't she bring it up casually? The omission felt deliberate. I wandered into my small home office off the hallway, where I kept bills, trucking logs, and the family desktop computer. Out of curiosity, I jiggled the mouse to wake the screen. It sprang to life, showing our usual home screen. No obvious sign of any software issue or new programs. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find. I shut it back down, a slight frown creasing my forehead. As I stepped back, my foot nudged something under the desk. I bent down and retrieved a small plastic action figure, one of Evan's, a superhero from the cartoon we'd watched. I smiled briefly. He was always leaving toys around the house. But then I noticed something else on the carpet, half hidden under the desk chair's wheelbase. A crumpled napkin, stained with a faint smear of chocolate and the distinctive pink logo of Millie's Creamery. I picked it up between my fingers. We didn't have any pink napkins at home, and I certainly hadn't been to that creamery. Must have been left from their outing, I thought. Marcia probably didn't realize one of the napkins ended up in here. For a moment, I pictured it. My wife and son and this coworker sitting together at the ice cream shop, laughing about something. Was he sitting in my chair when he fixed the computer? Did they talk about me? Stop it, I scolded myself, tossing the napkin into the wastebasket. There was no use spinning scenarios without facts. Still, as I straightened up, I felt an uncomfortable tightness in my chest. Later that afternoon, I busied myself mowing the lawn and tinkering with a minor repair on my truck. Physical work usually cleared my head, but today it did little to chase away the questions circling my mind. Over and over, I replayed the morning's conversation, Evan's chirpy anecdotes, and Marcia's quick explanation. Each time I arrived at the same unsettled feeling. I realized I was experiencing something I hadn't in years: suspicion. The notion that my wife, my high school sweetheart, the mother of my children, might be hiding something from me beyond a little white lie. It felt absurd, and yet here I was, dwelling on it. As dusk fell on Saturday, we took the kids to the park as promised. I tried to be present, pushing Evan on the swings, cheering Ashley as she attempted an old cartwheel on the grass. Through it all, I kept stealing glances at Marcia. She seemed herself for the most part, attentive to the kids, chatting with another mom from the neighborhood who was there. But when she caught me looking, she'd flash me that same quick smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. That night, after the kids were in bed, I found her in the living room folding laundry. I sat down next to her on the couch, an uneasy weight on my tongue. I wanted to ask more about Brandon, to banish the awkward feeling that had settled between us. But I didn't want to sound accusatory or paranoid. Instead, I gently took a pair of socks from her hands and helped fold. You know, I was thinking maybe I could clear my schedule next weekend. We could go out, just the two of us. Dinner and a movie. It's been a while. She looked up in surprise. Really? What about your roots? I'll talk to dispatch, turn down an assignment or two. We deserve a break. I forced a light tone, but I meant every word. Perhaps I was being silly letting this bother me. Perhaps I just needed to reconnect with my wife and this suspicion would evaporate. Her face softened for a moment, an expression of gratitude or guilt flickering there. But then she glanced down at the shirt she was folding. Next weekend? Oh, I promised my sister I'd help her with some home painting on Saturday. It slipped my mind. Maybe the weekend after? Sure, I said quietly. We finished the laundry in an uneasy silence, broken only by the quiet rustle of fabric. She went to bed early, citing a headache. I stayed up, sitting in the darkened living room with only the low buzz of the refrigerator for company, my thoughts churning. Maybe the logical, loving husband in me should have just let it go. Trust my wife until given a real reason not to. After all, trust had never been an issue in 20-some years. But something about the day's events kept gnawing at me. I thought about that quick, defensive note in her voice when she explained Brandon's visit. The way she hadn't mentioned it until I did. Her sudden recollection of a promise to her sister just when I suggested time together. Tiny things, really. Hardly evidence of anything. But like small pebbles in a shoe, those tiny things were piling up, making it hard to walk comfortably in my marriage. In the darkness, I found myself considering scenarios I'd never imagined having to entertain. Was it possible Marcia was unfaithful? The idea felt foreign and sickening. This was the woman who had cried tears of joy with me at each of our children's births, who held my hand when I was in the hospital after that warehouse accident 5 years ago, who still left me love notes in my suitcase on longer trips. She wouldn't betray me. She couldn't. And yet I realized with a shiver, countless people probably thought the same, right until they discovered otherwise. I rubbed my palms over my face, trying to dispel the grim thoughts. If there was anything going on, I needed to know. But I had to be sure before I let suspicion tear apart our family. Confronting her now, based on a gut feeling and a few offhand clues, could lead to anger and denial, maybe irreparable damage if I was wrong. No, if I wanted the truth, I would have to seek it out quietly, carefully. Like a truck negotiating a dangerous curve, I needed to approach with caution, not speed. Somewhere in the midnight hour, I made a decision. I would not confront Marcia yet. Instead, I would watch, listen, and gather any information I could. If there was nothing to find, I'd happily prove myself a fool and apologize for doubting her, even if only in my own mind. But if my instincts were right, I pushed that thought away, refusing to complete it. Instead, I headed to bed, slipping under the covers beside my wife's sleeping form. She was turned away from me, her breathing soft and steady. I stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I ever felt on any stretch of empty highway. In the silent darkness, I promised myself one thing. I would get to the bottom of this, whatever it took. Chapter 3. The Unwelcome Sight. The following week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Each day on the road, I replayed 100 possibilities in my mind. I paid more attention to Marcia's phone conversations when I called in the evenings. Did her voice sound different? Was there something guarded in her words? She seemed as she always did, asking about when I'd be home, updating me on the kids' homework and little dramas. If anything, she was a bit more attentive, ending each call with "love you, drive safe," in that gentle tone that used to warm me. Now it just tied me in knots because I didn't know if it was genuine or an act to mask her guilt. By Wednesday, I had resolved on a plan. It was risky and felt wildly out of character, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing doubts. That morning, before dawn, I set out on a routine interstate delivery route that was supposed to have an overnight leg. I was scheduled to haul a loaded trailer down to a depot 2 states away, rest overnight, and drive back Thursday. I hadn't told Marcia, but I'd arranged with a fellow driver to take over for me partway and finish the delivery. In return, I'd owe him a favor on a future run, a common courtesy among truckers. My colleague met me at a truck stop about 100 miles out of town. We switched rigs and he rumbled off to complete the route. I turned my 18-wheeler around and headed back toward Greenville, heart pounding at what I was about to do. By late afternoon, I was on the outskirts of our town. I pulled into a roadside diner parking lot about 15 minutes from home. Leaving my big rig in plain view on our street would have been like sounding an alarm. Instead, I'd called the cab from the diner, giving the driver an address 1 block over from Sycamore Lane. Dusk was just settling when I slipped out of the taxi, duffel bag in hand, under the pretense of being a traveler at the wrong address. The driver pulled away, leaving me standing on the corner of Maple and 3rd, the street parallel to my own. The air was warm and thick, late summer crickets chirping from the hedges. I felt a trickle of sweat run down my back, partly from the humidity, mostly from nerves. Trying to appear nonchalant, I walked the short distance through the neighborhood, circling around until I reached the quieter end of Sycamore Lane. From the shadows beneath an oak tree, I spotted my house. The lights were on in the living room and upstairs in the kids' rooms. Through the sheer curtains, I could make out movement, likely the kids. It was just past 8 p.m. Taking a steadying breath, I crept closer, staying on the opposite side of the street. I had dressed in dark clothes and a baseball cap, hoping to blend into the night. It felt absurd, like I was a burglar about to break into my own home. But I had to know. About 20 minutes later, the upstairs lights in Ashley's and Evan's rooms blinked out, one after the other. Bedtime for the kids. Only the downstairs living room lamp remained, casting a yellow glow in the front bay window and faintly illuminating the driveway. I checked my phone, 8:45 p.m. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure anyone nearby could hear it, and then I saw it. Twin beams of headlights turning onto our street. A car was approaching, its engine a low hum. I ducked behind the trunk of the oak, peering out. A red sedan rolled into view, coming to a stop in front of my house. The car was a sporty model, definitely not one of our neighbors. I clenched my jaw. A red car. Evan had mentioned a cool red car. I watched as the driver's door opened. Even under the street lamp's glow, I recognized the tall, lean figure that stepped out. A man, perhaps early 40s, with glasses that caught the light. He wore a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled, looking casual. He glanced around briefly as if checking the surroundings. I shrank back into the shadows, holding my breath. My front door opened and Marcia emerged onto the porch. She had on a light summer dress, one I hadn't seen before, pale blue, flowing just past her knees. She usually dressed casually at home in shorts or jeans, rarely a dress unless we were going out. My stomach churned. Why was she all dressed up? She smiled at the man on our walkway, a smile so warm and familiar it made my chest ache. I realized I hadn't seen that particular smile in a while. The kind of smile she gave when she was truly happy or excited. She used to smile at me like that. The man, Brandon, I assumed, walked up to the porch quietly. From my vantage, I saw him pause at the bottom of the steps and say something in a low voice. Marcia glanced back into the house, perhaps checking the kids were indeed in bed and not watching, and then stepped down to meet him on the path. They were only a few feet from me, separated by the yard and a strip of darkness, yet I felt miles away, rooted in place. Then she kissed him. It was as if the world stopped. My vision tunneled, zeroed in on the sight of my wife in another man's arms, her lips pressed to his in a slow, unmistakably intimate kiss. His hands settled on her waist, pulling her closer. They stayed like that for what felt like an eternity, though it could only have been a few seconds. I realized I had stopped breathing. My hand gripped the bark of the oak so hard my fingers dug into it. The pain kept me present, kept me from doing something reckless like charging across the street. When they finally parted, they exchanged a few whispered words I couldn't catch. Marcia took his hand and led him quietly up the porch and into the house, closing the door behind them. The soft click of the latch echoed in my ears like a gunshot. They were inside my home, with my children asleep upstairs. The audacity and disrespect hit me like a wave, momentarily surging fury through the devastation I felt. I forced myself to remain calm. Losing it now would accomplish nothing except alerting them. I had to see more to know how far this went. Swallowing against the bile in my throat, I crept across the street, staying low. In the front flower bed beneath the living room bay window, I crouched among the hydrangea bushes Marcia had planted last spring. Through a gap in the curtains, I had a partial view of the living room interior. Brandon sat on my couch. He had the ease of someone who had done it before. He lounged back, one arm draped along the top of the sofa. Marcia disappeared from view for a moment. I heard the clink of glass and a murmur of voices. She reappeared carrying 2 wine glasses and handed one to him as she sat close by his side. My mind flashed back to our dinner last Friday, how she'd been quiet and distant. Now I saw her animated, leaning in towards him as they spoke in low tones. He said something that made her laugh softly, a sound that used to be music to my ears. Now it twisted the knife in deeper. I fumbled to silence my phone, which was still in my pocket, and started the camera. With trembling hands, I raised it to snap a few photos through the narrow gap in the curtain. The images were dark and slightly blurry, but you could make out 2 figures on a couch, her face turned toward his. Whether that would mean anything to anyone else, I wasn't sure, but I took them anyway. I also hit the record button, capturing a grainy video of them clinking their wine glasses together. Through the window, only faint muffled voices could be heard. Nothing distinct, but the visual was damning enough to me. As I recorded, Marcia set her wine down and Brandon brushed a strand of hair from her face. She leaned into his touch, and they kissed again. More deeply this time. I looked away, jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. Hot tears blurred my vision. I wasn't sure if it was anger, heartbreak, or both. Perhaps both. The urge to burst in, to rip him off my couch and beat him to a pulp was almost overwhelming. My hands curled into fists in the dirt. But I didn't. The image of my kids flashed in my mind, sleeping innocently upstairs, trusting their world was as safe and stable as ever. I couldn't shatter that, not tonight. Not until I figured out how to handle this with the least damage to them. I forced myself to keep watching, to etch this scene into my memory, however painful. Inside, the 2 of them broke their kiss. Brandon whispered something and Marcia stood, taking his hand again. She led him out of the living room. The only place they could be headed was the stairs, up to the 2nd floor, toward the bedrooms. Toward my bedroom. I felt a red haze at the edge of my vision. They wouldn't. She wouldn't be so brazen, would she? Bringing him to our bed, while our children slept a few doors down? The thought made me physically ill. I had to cover my mouth to contain the ragged breath that escaped. But I didn't hear the creak of the stairs through the window. Instead, I heard the faint click of the hallway door leading to the garage, or maybe the back door. Were they going out back? Curious, and desperate to not imagine them in our marital bed, I slunk around the side of the house, careful with each step. The backyard was darker. The motion sensor light didn't trigger because I stayed outside its range. Through the back kitchen window, I saw them again. They were headed into my office, the small downstairs room that served as my workspace. My heart hammered. That was directly below the kids' rooms. Perhaps they thought being downstairs would keep the children from waking if they made any noise. A fresh wave of disgust rolled through me. In the darkness, I circled to the side where my office had a narrow high window for ventilation. It was cracked open. I often left it that way to catch a breeze, and apparently it hadn't been closed. Through it, I could hear them more clearly now, though I had to strain. "Should be okay. They're asleep," I caught Marcia's whisper. Brandon's voice followed, a low murmur. "Are you sure your husband's gone all night?" My breath hitched, waiting for her answer. "Positive," she replied softly. "He's states away by now. He won't be back until tomorrow evening at the earliest." The certainty in her tone was like a slap. She had planned this with full confidence I'd never find out. There was a rustling sound, clothing perhaps. I shut my eyes hard, pressing my back against the cool brick wall of the house. A soft moan drifted out through the window next, unmistakable in nature. I couldn't listen to more. It felt like a voyeuristic horror that I never asked to witness. My wife was with another man, in my house, likely doing unspeakable things at this very moment. Tears of rage and sorrow burned at my eyes. I bit down on my fist until I tasted blood, using the pain to ground myself. I needed to hold it together. Breaking down or storming in now would only make things worse. I had evidence, photos, a recording. Not perfect, but something. And I had the truth, as bitter as it was, finally laid bare. Through the small window, I heard them continue in hushed, heated whispers and muffled movements. It made my skin crawl and heartbreak all at once. I retreated, step by careful step, away from the office window, away from that awful sound. I moved back to the fence at the edge of our yard. My chest was heaving as I gulped in fresh air, trying not to retch. A part of me felt dead at that moment. But another part, a part I didn't know I had, was coming alive, hardening into something cold and steely. As I stood under the moonlight in my own backyard, unseen and unheard, I felt a strange clarity wash over me. I now had my answer, the worst answer. And with it, oddly, came a sense of calm determination. The shock was fading, replaced by a grim resolve. I realized I was done being the unsuspecting, trusting husband. Whatever navet that had lingered in me was gone. In its place, a new purpose took root. I would make them pay for this betrayal, both of them. But not tonight. Tonight, I would swallow the pain and disappear like a ghost, just as I'd come. It was past midnight when I finally crept away from the house and back to the street. The red sedan was still parked out front. I gave it a wide berth, moving like a shadow along the sidewalk until I was safely around the corner. Then I walked, one heavy step at a time, back toward the diner parking lot where my truck waited. Inside the cab, I locked the doors and simply sat in the dark for a long while, hands trembling on the steering wheel. In the silence, I allowed myself a moment of release. I let out a guttural cry of anguish and slammed my fist against the dashboard, the pain barely registering. Tears streamed down my face unchecked. I wasn't just mourning the affair I'd confirmed. I was mourning the death of the life I thought I had. Everything felt like it had cracked in two: my marriage, my trust, my own identity as a husband and father in a secure family. Eventually, the tears dried, and the anger remained. I replayed Marcia's voice in my head. He states away by now. The confidence, even slight smugness, in how she said it. She had grown bold in her deception, comfortable. That would be her undoing. I thought of Brandon's question. "You sure your husband's gone?" And how easily she assured him. They thought I was a fool, safely out of their way. Let them think that a little longer, I thought, wiping my face with a rough swipe. Let them be comfortable. They wouldn't be for much longer. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the lot, heading toward the outskirts of town. I wouldn't go home until morning at the time I was expected. That gave me hours to plan, to think through my next steps. I drove aimlessly on the highway loop around Greenville for a while, the thrum of the diesel engine steadying my heartbeat. By the time the first hint of pre-dawn light touched the horizon, I had the skeleton of a plan forming in my mind, a plan for revenge that would hit them where it hurt the most, beyond anything as simple as catching them in the act. They wanted to play me for a fool. I would let them just a little longer while I set the stage. And when all was ready, they would never see it coming. With that grim promise fueling me, I steered my rig toward home, ready to pretend just a little while more. Chapter 4. Quiet Preparation. Maintaining a FA8 of normalcy in the days that followed was one of the hardest things I've ever done. When I walked through the door Thursday evening, right on schedule, Marcia greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and a warm dinner on the stove, as if nothing at all was amiss. I forced myself to smile, to hug my children, to sit at the table and eat, all while choking down the bitterness that threatened to rise in my throat. Every time I looked at my wife's face, I had to fight off the mental image of her entwined with that man the night before. It felt surreal to act like the loving husband when inside I was roiling with anger and hurt. But act I did. I laughed at the appropriate moments when Evan recounted a funny story from school, and I nodded along as Ashley talked about her upcoming math test. I even complimented Marcia's cooking, making sure to meet her eyes and smile the way I used to. If she noticed that my smile didn't quite reach my own eyes, she didn't mention it. In fact, she seemed a touch more attentive than usual, asking if I was feeling okay, insisting I looked tired. I lied smoothly that the recent long hauls were catching up to me. She encouraged me to get some rest. Rest. The word was almost laughable. I hadn't truly slept in over 36 hours by then, fueled by adrenaline and dark purpose. But I nodded and later feigned an early bedtime, escaping to the quiet of our bedroom. Behind the closed door, I allowed my face to fall into its true state, a grim, cold stare, as I pulled out a notepad I'd tucked into my duffel. While the house settled and Marcia busied herself getting the kids to bed, I began scribbling down lists and notes in a shorthand only I understood, laying out a plan step by step. First priority, secure my position and protect the kids. That meant seeing a lawyer, discreetly. The very next day, Friday, I arranged a meeting with a divorce attorney in the city under the guise of an errand. I told Marcia I needed to take my truck in for maintenance and that I might be late. She didn't question it. I often handled vehicle issues on Fridays when off the road. At the attorney's office, a quiet, gray-haired man named Mr. Harlan, recommended by a trucker buddy, I presented the evidence I had so far. I calmly described the situation, though my hands tightened on my knees when I recounted the affair. Mr. Harlan listened without surprise. I suspected he'd heard it all before, then gave me a sober nod. In this state, adultery can be grounds for a fault-based divorce, he explained. It may not significantly affect property division since we're essentially no fault, but it could impact spousal support if we pursue that angle, and it might give you leverage in settlement negotiations. Leverage. I liked that word in this context. I want primary custody of our two younger children, I said firmly. Our oldest, Daniel, was an adult, but I was already thinking ahead for Ashley and Evan, and I don't want to pay her a dime more than necessary. He took notes. Gather as much evidence as you can, dates, times, any proof of the affair. Keep records of anything that might show marital funds spent on the affair if applicable. Do not tip her off. And if possible, avoid moving out of the house yourself. It's better if she does when the time comes to strengthen your standing for custody of the home and children. I assured him I had no intention of leaving the family home to her, and that I would be continuing as if everything was normal until I was ready to act. We discussed the rough outline of divorce proceedings, and he agreed to begin preparing paperwork, but I asked him not to file anything just yet. Not until I gave the go-ahead. I wasn't ready to pull the trigger, not until my plan for them was set in motion. Before I left, I made one more request. I might need a private investigator or some assistance to gather evidence, maybe even background on the man. Can you recommend someone? He slid a card across the desk. This is a reliable investigator we work with often. Let them know I referred you. I pocketed the card. I wasn't sure if I'd use it. Part of me wanted to handle every detail personally, but it was good to have options. Next, I turned to finances. Over the weekend, while Marcia was out shopping with the kids, I combed through our bank and credit card statements. Rage bubbled up anew as I spotted a few transactions that fit the pattern. A charge at Millie's Creamery. On the Wednesday afternoon in question, a restaurant bill from 2 weeks ago on a night I remembered she claimed to have a girls' night with a friend, and even a hotel charge on a day last month I thought she was working late. She had covered her tracks moderately well. The hotel was a generic chain off the interstate, maybe a midday rendezvous. But seeing it in our joint credit statement was like swallowing broken glass. I quietly transferred half of our primary savings into an account solely in my name. Something the lawyer had advised was permissible as long as it was marital property I was entitled to. I also stopped any automatic deposits into the joint account, opting to route my next paycheck to a new personal account she didn't know about. This way, if things escalated suddenly, she wouldn't be able to clean out our funds in retaliation or panic. During this time, I also did my homework on Brandon. A bit of social media sleuthing, and a look at Marcia's company website revealed his full name, Brandon Cole, project manager. A LinkedIn search showed he'd joined the company only 3 months prior, so the affair was relatively new, likely coinciding with his arrival. He was originally from another city, divorced, according to a Facebook profile I found that appeared to be his, listing a divorce about 2 years ago, and had no children. That explained why he might be cavalier about sleeping with another man's wife. He'd already nuked one marriage of his own. Through a friend of a friend, a guy I knew who worked in IT for the same company, I gleaned that Brandon was indeed technically Marcia's superior on a big project she'd been excited about. The friend, not knowing anything was amiss, casually mentioned that people at work said Brandon and Marcia made a good team and were often working late together. I had to grind my teeth and thank him for the info without betraying any reaction. Their workplace did have policies about relationships, but they were often ignored unless someone complained. I filed that info away. I intended to give HR a reason to pay attention eventually. Meanwhile, I kept up my role at home with painstaking care. I didn't want to raise even an iota of suspicion. In fact, I started making a point of complaining about work a bit more and talking about how exhausted I was to give myself cover for any lapses in warmth or attention. Sometimes I would catch Marcia studying me, and I wondered if she could sense the change. If she did, she likely attributed it to my being overworked or in a funk. To further throw her off guard, I began engaging her more, not less. It was a counterintuitive strategy, but I hoped it would prevent her from suspecting I knew. I asked about her day, listened attentively to the trivial stories from her office, each mention of coworkers making my ears prick for the name Brandon, which she never uttered. I even suggested we have a family movie night or grill outside, acting as if some guilt for being away was spurring me to be more present. During one such evening, about a week after I discovered the affair, we were all sitting on the back porch after dinner. The kids had wandered inside, leaving just me and Marcia under the fairy lights she had strung up last year. The night was gentle, filled with the sound of cicadas. I sipped a beer and casually said, "You know, I read something interesting today in the news." "Oh?" she said, leaning back in her patio chair. She had a glass of wine in hand and looked relaxed. "Yeah," I continued lightly. "A company downtown had a bit of a scandal. Apparently, a manager was fired for having an affair with someone he supervised. It violated company policy when HR found out." I delivered the line with an air of mild amusement, as if it were idle gossip. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcia's grip on her wine glass tighten almost imperceptibly. She kept her face neutral, but her eyes flicked towards me and then away. "That's so?" she said, aiming for a casual tone that came out a touch too forced. I allowed a faint smirk to play on my lips. "Yeah, people think they're being discreet, but you never know who's watching." Her head turned sharply then. For a split second, our eyes met. I could see a flash of uncertainty in hers, maybe even fear. But just as quickly, she broke the gaze and gave a short, brittle laugh. "Well, glad I work at a boring place. No drama like that in our little company." She stood up abruptly, gathering the empty plate from her dessert. "I'm going to head inside, load the dishwasher." I watched her hurry through the door. Her reaction was telling. A mix of panic and relief coursed through me. Panic that maybe I'd tipped my hand too far, and relief at confirming that my words struck a nerve. I hadn't said a single name, but her body language screamed guilt. After that, she grew more cautious. I noticed she took her texting habits off the family radar, where once she might have left her phone on the kitchen counter, now it was often in her pocket. Sometimes at night, I'd wake and sense her easing out of bed. I'd find her downstairs ostensibly getting water or checking on a noise, but I suspected she was messaging him from the privacy of the living room while I slept. It was difficult to resist the urge to confront her right there, to grab the phone and see the lies spelled out in texts. But I restrained myself. Every lie she told, every secret meeting, was just adding fuel to the fire I was stoking for them. I decided it was time to gather the final pieces of evidence. If I were to thoroughly ruin them in every aspect, I needed the incontrovertible proof in hand. Taking a page out of their own playbook, I planned a little deceit of my own. I told Marcia I had another long haul on the upcoming Tuesday night, a 2-day trip. It wasn't true. I took a day off, but I wanted to see if she'd bite. The glint in her eye and the slight uptick in her mood told me everything. She was already thinking about seeing him. What she didn't know was that before I left, I planted 2 small devices in the house. The first was a motion-activated mini camera, hidden carefully amid some books on the shelf in my home office, the very room they had used last time. It was angled to capture the couch and desk area. I'd tested it. The lens was concealed behind the dark mesh of an old speaker on the shelf. Unless you knew exactly where to look, it was invisible. The second device was a GPS tracker, I managed to attach to the underside of her car the night before. A slim magnetic gadget no larger than a matchbox, it would ping my phone with her location in real time. If for some reason they decided to meet elsewhere, I would know. I left nothing to chance. Early Tuesday morning, I kissed her goodbye in the driveway, dressed in my work coveralls, and climbed into my personal pickup truck. I told her I'd pick up my big rig at the depot. As I pulled away, she waved, believing I'd be gone until Thursday. Instead, I circled back and parked on a side street a few blocks away. From there, in my hidden vantage, I watched the GPS app. Sure enough, shortly after lunchtime, her car moved, heading not toward her office, where she was supposedly spending the day off after a morning meeting, but toward the west side of town. The tracker pinpointed her stopping at a park by the river. It made sense. It was a weekday, likely quiet there. I hopped into the pickup and followed at a safe distance, careful not to be seen. When I got close to the park, I parked and continued on foot, using the tree-lined path as cover. Through the canopy, I spotted them. Marcia and Brandon sitting on a bench by the water side by side. From afar, they could have been any couple enjoying a sunny afternoon. But the way he leaned in to tuck her hair behind her ear, and the soft kiss she placed on his cheek were not acts of mere friendship. I snapped a few telephoto pictures with the camera I'd borrowed from the PI. I had decided to enlist his help for high-quality images, though I did the field work myself. Each shutter click felt like a betrayal being etched into history. There was my wife in the arms of another man, out in public, but just discreet enough in an out-of-the-way spot. Later, the GPS showed them heading back to our house. I trailed carefully. Evidently, with me gone, she felt safe bringing him into our home in broad daylight this time. My heart pounded with a mix of fury and morbid anticipation as I parked a distance away and remotely accessed the feed from the hidden camera on my phone. The app connected after a moment, and a grainy live video popped up. It showed my home office couch from a slight angle. It was empty at that second, but within a minute, the feed captured them entering the room. The camera's motion alert vibrated, indicating it was recording. On my phone screen, I watched as Marcia pulled Brandon by the hand into the room, both laughing about something unheard. They sat on the couch and soon they were kissing, oblivious to the tiny, unblinking eye watching them. I hit the record button on my app, ensuring I saved a copy of whatever happened. I couldn't watch much more, it made my blood boil and my stomach sicken. But I let the camera do its work. The PI had assured me the device had plenty of storage and could even pick up sound faintly. That was good. Maybe they'd say things that would be useful in cornering them later. I withdrew and waited, making notes in my pad about everything: times, locations, what I captured. This log would be useful in the divorce and any other action I took. By late afternoon, the tracker indicated Brandon's car leaving. I glimpsed him driving off, alone. A short while later, Marcia's car headed toward the grocery store, likely a pretense to explain how she'd spent her day if the kids asked, and to ensure nothing looked suspicious if a neighbor noticed her car out. I returned to the house only after dark, parking my truck back at the depot and getting a ride home, as if returning from the trip early. I walked in the door to find her and the kids finishing dinner. She put on a surprised smile. "You're home early. Everything okay?" "Delivery got rescheduled," I lied smoothly, hanging my hat. "So I figured I'd come home." She gave me a quick peck and an extra warm welcome. Likely out of guilt-fueled cheer, I thought cynically. "We missed you," she said. "If I knew you were coming, I'd have waited with dinner." It took all my self-control not to recoil. Instead, I played the tired husband and just said, "No worries, I'll heat up a plate." Later that night, as she slept, I retrieved the camera and downloaded its footage to my laptop. The video was clear enough. It showed them kissing, her straddling him on the couch at one point, clothing being shed. I fast-forwarded with a clenched jaw, pausing only when I saw them speaking afterward as they got dressed. I put in earbuds and listened carefully to the muffled audio. "Hate sneaking like this," I heard Brandon's voice faintly. "How much longer, Marcia?" She sighed on the recording. "I don't know. I need to time it right. If I hurt him now, Ashley will never forgive me. Maybe after the holidays I'll talk to him. It's just complicated." My breath caught. Talk to me after the holidays? Meaning she was considering ending our marriage, but on her selfish ideal timetable, all while continuing this affair in the meantime. Brandon's reply came through a bit indistinct, something like not wanting to hide forever. and that he loved her. That word turned my stomach again. Marcia responded, "I love you too, you know that." There was a soft sound, likely a kiss. Then she added, "Just be patient. Once I figure out the money and the kids, we can be together." I just, I can't bear the thought of breaking up my family right this second. Anger flared white-hot in me. How considerate of her, worrying about breaking up the family while actively doing just that behind my back. The hypocrisy was astounding. Brandon made some remark about me not suspecting anything, laughing that I probably had no clue at all. Marcia shushed him, but chuckled. It felt like another knife between my ribs. I had heard enough. I saved the audio, the video, the photos. Then I carefully packaged copies of these onto a secure drive. I locked it in my toolbox in the garage, a place she'd never look. With every piece in place, I finally felt ready. It was time to set my plan of revenge into motion. All that remained was to decide the sequence of strikes and watch as their lives, so carefully intertwined at my expense, began to unravel. I closed my notebook after writing the final steps and leaned back in my chair. In the silence of the midnight house, I could hear Marcia's steady breathing in our bedroom down the hall. It's a strange thing to lie so close to someone who has betrayed you so deeply, to feel their warmth while knowing the cold truth. But I felt almost nothing now when I looked at her. The love I once had was burned up, converted into fuel for the retribution that was coming. They had made their moves and thought themselves clever. Now it was my turn to move, in a game they didn't even realize we were playing. Chapter 5. The Strike. I set the dominoes in motion on a cool Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after I'd confirmed everything. It began with a series of emails. The first was addressed anonymously to the Human Resources Department of Marcia's company, as well as her CEO. In it, I laid out a concise and factual account. A manager, Brandon Cole, carrying on an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate, my wife, in violation of company policy, complete with dates and even on-premises liaisons hinted. I suspected they'd used late hours at the office as cover more than once. I attached a few choice pieces of evidence, blurred still frames from the video clearly showing Brandon and Marcia in a compromising embrace in our home office. I cropped out the more explicit parts, showing just enough to identify them. And time-stamped photo of them kissing in the park on a weekday afternoon when they were presumably at work. The tone of the email was that of a concerned third party, careful and professional. I knew that even if HR doubted the source, the visuals would force them to act. No company wants a potential harassment or misconduct scandal unchecked. The second email I sent was to Brandon directly from a throwaway address. It was short. "I know who you are and what you've done. By the time you read this, your boss and HR will know too. Good luck." I didn't sign it, of course, and I doubted he'd trace it back to me, but I wanted to rattle him. To let him know that he hadn't gotten away scot-free, even before the official hammer fell. Next, I prepared the divorce papers. Mr. Harlan had them ready to file, and I told him this was the day. A quick call that morning confirmed that he'd lodged the paperwork with the court and arranged for a process server to have them delivered to Marcia by day's end. I had specified where I wanted them served, at home, in the early evening. I wanted to be present when she got them. Lastly, I composed a heartfelt email to our oldest, Daniel, away at college. I didn't want him blindsided by what was about to happen. Without diving into ugly details, I told him that his mother and I were going to separate and that I'd explain more when I could, but he should know that none of it was his fault or Ashley's or Evan's. I assured him I loved him, and so did his mom. It was the best I could do to cushion the blow I knew would devastate him. I hated that it had to be in an email, but time was short, and I didn't want him hearing it from someone else first, if news spread. By midday, the workplace drama had unfolded swiftly. I knew because, as anticipated, Marcia called me, something she rarely did when I was working, unless it was urgent. I was at home, actually, waiting. I answered on the third ring, putting just enough noise in my voice to sound like I was busy. "Hey, hun, what's up? Everything okay?" There was panic in her voice. Not really. Something's happened at work. They called Brandon and me into HR, and someone sent them these horrible lies about us." "Lies?" I asked, injecting concern into my tone. I already knew they likely confronted them separately, per HR protocol. Possibly, they even showed her the evidence. "They accused me and Brandon of Of having an affair, she blurted. She was breathing hard like she'd been crying. They had pictures, but it's not what it looks like. It's... My stomach turned at her instinct to continue lying, even now. But I played dumb. Wait, slow down. They think you and your boss... Pictures? What pictures? I don't know. Her voice cracked. Somebody must be stalking us or trying to set us up. They showed me a photo of us at the park and one that looked like in a room. I mean, it was us, but it's out of context. It's not... Enough. That was enough. I stood up and in one motion swept the stack of work papers off the table onto the floor. She jumped at my sudden movement, startled. Stop, I said, my voice low but like steel. The mask of concern dropped from my face. Just stop, Marcia. She blinked, confusion crossing her face at my change in tone. What's wrong? I felt an icy calm descend over me. Years on the road had taught me that in moments of crisis, my mind could become eerily clear. This was one of those moments. I know, I said quietly. She frowned. No? No what? I met her gaze dead on, letting her see the cold anger in mine. I know about you and Brandon. I know everything. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She went pale, one hand gripping the edge of the table. I took my phone from my pocket, tapped a few times, and placed it on the table between us. On the screen was paused video footage. Her and Brandon on our couch, half undressed. Her eyes fell to it and she made a strangled sound. Shall I press play? I asked bitterly. She recoiled as if the phone were a snake. Oh my God, that's what you said that night, isn't it? I hissed, unable to hold back entirely. Oh God. Oh, Brandon, right there on that couch while your children slept upstairs. Marcia surged to her feet, backing away from me, her hand over her mouth. How did you... How did I get that? I finished for her, kicking the chair aside as I stepped forward. Her back hit the counter. She had nowhere to go. Because I put a camera in there, Marcia. Because I've known for weeks. Because I came home early that night and watched you lead him into our home. She looked like she might collapse. I almost hoped she would, if only to cease the pathetic stammering that was coming from her lips now. I'm so... I can explain. I laughed, a single, sharp bark devoid of humor. Explain. There's nothing to explain. I heard your explanations, your excuses on the recordings. I saw how you lied to my face every day since. There's no explanation that makes this okay. Tears streamed down her face. Please, please, just let's talk. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She reached a hand toward me, trembling. I stepped back out of her reach and folded my arms. Sorry you got caught. If HR hadn't intervened, would you be here begging forgiveness? Or would you be in his arms right now, in my bed perhaps, planning which day to finally leave me after you sorted out your little money and kids problems? I threw her own words from the video back at her. Realization flickered in her eyes that I truly knew everything. Her shoulders sagged and a wail escaped her. I never wanted to hurt you. Too late, I cut her off. My voice rose now, no longer controlled. You didn't just hurt me, Marcia. You've obliterated our life, and for what? Some fling with a man who already ruined his own marriage? Did it make you feel desired? Was it exciting sneaking around, lying to me, using our son as a prop for your outings? She shook her head, sobbing. It wasn't like that. I mean, I thought I loved him. The word loved made me slam my fist on the countertop beside her, startling both of us. I took a step back, exhaling hard, trying to regain composure. Love, right. And what about the 20-plus years you had with me? Or was that all a lie too? She sank to the floor, covering her face. It wasn't a lie. I did love you. I do. I felt so alone. You were always away and I was stupid and weak and you chose to betray your family, I said, each word like lead. You could have talked to me. You could have suggested counseling. Hell, you could have asked for a divorce before doing this if you were so unhappy, but you didn't. You lied and cheated under my roof. You made our kids unwitting accomplices. You brought that man into our home. Do you understand how disgusting that is to me? She looked up, crawling to her knees, mascara smeared. Please, I'll do anything. Don't leave. We can fix this. I nearly laughed again at the absurdity. Fix this? There's no fixing it. It's done. I turned away and walked a few paces to keep from yelling right in her face. My eye caught the window, across the street, old Mrs. Duncan was walking her dog, blatantly peering over. No doubt she heard some of the raised voices. News would spread fast in the neighborhood. Good, I found myself thinking coldly. Let them all know. I heard Marcia stand shakily behind me. What? What are you going to do? She asked in a small voice. I turned back to her, pulling myself up to full height. I've already done it. Your job is as good as gone. You can pretty much count on that. Everyone there knows what you are now. I imagine by tomorrow Brandon will be fired. Maybe you too. She opened her mouth, then closed it, realizing the truth. Perhaps she wondered how HR got those emails. The dawning horror on her face was almost pitiable. You sent them. I did. I folded my arms. I also have divorce papers on the way. You'll be served within hours. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. We both startled. I glanced at my phone. A text from the process server confirming delivery. Perfect timing. Marcia looked towards the front door, confusion knitting her brow. Who? Open it, I said grimly. She stumbled to the door, wiping her face, trying to compose herself. I followed a few steps behind. Through the stained glass inset, I could see a man in a baseball cap holding an envelope. Marcia opened the door a crack, and the man's voice drifted in. Marcia Williams? Yes, she said softly. The man slid the envelope through. You've been served. Have a good day, ma'am. He departed quickly. Marcia looked down at the envelope in her hands as if it were a snake ready to bite. She turned toward me, not yet opening it, tears still dripping off her chin. Divorce papers? She whispered. I nodded. Citing adultery. I'm seeking primary custody of the kids. I've already moved most of the money into an account you can't touch. You'll find I'm not going to leave you much. Adultery is a bar to alimony in this state, by the way, so you can forget any spousal support. She started shaking her head, fresh panic in her eyes. No, Mark, please. Think of Ashley and Evan. We can work something out for them. Please don't take them from me. Her pleading for the kids almost softened me. Almost. I thought of how she said she couldn't bear breaking up the family, even as she actively did so. You should have thought of that before, when you were jeopardizing their home life. You think a judge will want to hand children over to a parent who prioritizes an affair over their well-being? I have evidence of you carrying this on under their noses. You're lucky if you get shared custody at this point. She clutched the envelope to her chest heaving. They're my babies. I can't lose them. An anger flared in me again. Perhaps you should have prioritized them over your feelings for your plaything. That struck deep. She flinched as if slapped. She had no response except ragged sobs. For a long moment, the only sound in the house was her crying softly and the ticking of the hallway clock. I felt empty, watching the woman I once loved crumble to pieces on the floor. This was the person I had built a life with, and now I didn't even recognize her. A part of me wanted to scream, to cry alongside her for all that was lost. But a larger part just felt relieved that the truth was finally out and that she was facing the consequences she'd earned. I realized I didn't want to look at her anymore. You need to leave, I said quietly. She glanced up, red-eyed and disoriented. What? Leave, I repeated. Go stay somewhere else tonight. I don't want you here when the kids get home. I'll explain something to them, but I can't have you here. Not right now. Maybe not ever. Her mouth worked in protest, but she likely saw the implacable resolve on my face. Mark, I don't have anywhere to go, she pleaded. Go to your sister's, or a hotel. Though I guess you and Brandon used one before, didn't you? Check back into that. My voice dripped with venom on that last part. She hugged herself, trembling. Please, let me at least see them. I'll go after dinner, just don't do this like this. I heard the crunch of tires on driveway. The school bus. Too late. They're here, I said, peering out to see Ashley and Evan getting off the bus at the corner. Marcia rushed to the powder room off the hall, trying to fix her face. I almost laughed at the futility. In a few minutes, their world would be upended no matter what she looked like. I opened the front door and braced myself as my children came in, full of after-school chatter that died the instant they saw both of us home in the afternoon and the state we were in. Mom? Dad? What's wrong? Ashley asked immediately, eyes flicking between us. At 15, she didn't miss the tear stains, the tension. Evan hovered at her side, sensing something was off. Marcia came out of the bathroom, voice wavering. Hey, kiddos. We need to talk. I gently moved in front of her, taking charge. Let's sit down, guys. We sat in the living room. How does one find the words to destroy their children's sense of security? There was no easy way. I kept it as simple as I could, my voice as steady as possible. Your mom and we've been having some problems. We are going to separate, and I've filed for divorce. Ashley gasped as if punched. Evan looked confused. Divorce? No. Why? Ashley cried, immediately turning to her mother. Mom, what did you do? She knew. Maybe not specifics, but our smart girl knew in her gut. Marcia dissolved into tears, reaching for them. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I stepped in. Your mom hurt me very badly. She broke the trust between us, that's all I'll say. I wouldn't throw explicit infidelity details at them, not now. I know this is a shock, but we will love you always, that will never change. We just can't be together anymore. Evan started to cry, and that nearly broke me. I held him, assuring him it wasn't his fault, that we both loved him. Ashley sat stiff and silent, tears in her eyes, but fury on her face as she looked at her mother. She might have guessed enough. Marcia was sobbing apologies, trying to hug the kids, but Ashley recoiled. Don't, she snapped, voice icy through tears. How could you, Mom? It became clear that Ashley at least had put two and two together. Perhaps she'd overheard something before or seen a text? Who knows? But the betrayal in her tone toward her mother was unmistakable. I intervened softly. Ash, we're all upset. This is hard, I know. I shot a glance at Marcia to step back, which she did, crumpling into a chair. It was chaotic and heartbreaking. But eventually I managed to usher the kids upstairs, telling them to pack an overnight bag. I decided I'd take them to my parents' house for the night to get them away from this tension. When I came back down, Marcia was still in the living room, clutching a throw pillow, looking utterly lost. They hate me, she whimpered. My baby girl hates me. I had no comfort to offer. That's something you'll have to earn back from her over a long time, if ever. For now, please go. I'll tell them you had to go away for a while to think. She looked around the home, our home, filled with family photos and memories, as if seeing it for the last time. Then she stood and shuffled toward the door. Will I see them tomorrow? I'll let you know, I said, not committing. Legally, I had no right to bar her from them until things were finalized, but I hoped she'd voluntarily give space now. She paused, hand on the doorknob, and looked back at me. Mark, I am so sorry. I know you may never forgive me. I don't expect you to. But please take care of yourself. I never wanted to hurt you like this. I felt a surge of anger again. After all this, worrying about me. Too late for that too, I replied quietly. With that, she slipped out of the door. I watched through the window as she slowly walked to her car and drove away, tears still streaming down her face. And just like that, she was gone from this house. Our house, now mine alone. In the aftermath, a strange calm settled over me. The storm had broken. The truth was out, and the wreckage lay around us. But in that wreckage, I saw the pieces of a new beginning for me and the kids. Over the next days and weeks, the consequences continued to unfurl, mostly as I intended. Brandon was indeed fired by the end of the week. An email went out at Marcia's company about a management change, and my IT friend filled me in that Brandon was let go for violating conduct. I doubt they kept him long enough to fully investigate her, but given the circumstances, Marcia preemptively resigned. There was no saving her reputation there, so she lost her job as well. Financially, that would sting, especially as I ensured through my lawyer that the divorce settlement left her with a fairly small portion of our assets. Not enough to be destitute. I wasn't out to ruin her beyond repair just to make sure she reaped what she sowed. But she wouldn't be living comfortably off me. Socially, the gossip mill in our town churned. Neighbors figured out something was wrong when she didn't come home for days. Eventually, it got out that she had cheated. Maybe she confided in a friend who let it slip, or maybe people just added clues. Small towns have few secrets. The sideways looks and cold shoulders she faced whenever she came by to see the kids told me enough. Where once she was a well-liked member of the PTA and community, now she was the woman who cheated on the reliable husband who was always working for his family. People can be harsh judges, And while I didn't revel in her being shunned, I also didn't lift a finger to help her image. That was her cross to bear. As for the children, it was a rocky road. Evan was confused and hurt, but in his innocence, he just wanted his mom and dad to be okay. I made sure he saw a therapist specialized in children of divorce to help him process. Ashley, on the other hand, was openly angry. She stayed with me, barely speaking to her mother during the initial weeks, except in screaming matches where she demanded to know why. I had to mediate and also encourage counseling for her. I hope in time she and her mother can salvage some relationship, but I suspect it will never be the same. Trust once broken is a hard thing to rebuild, even between parent and child. I was granted temporary primary custody as we sorted living arrangements. Marcia, to her credit, didn't fight it, likely out of guilt and on advice from her own lawyer. Eventually, we settled on joint legal custody, but the kids staying primarily with me and visitation for her. She ended up moving in with her sister on the other side of town, at least for now. That meant when the kids went to see her on weekends, they weren't in the house that held all the memories. I kept the house, another thing she conceded readily, perhaps as penance. And what of me, the man who had set out on this campaign of retribution? Did I feel satisfied? In part, yes. I won't pretend I didn't feel a grim sense of justice seeing the consequences play out. She and her lover lost nearly everything, their affair exposed, reputations ruined at work, careers derailed. Brandon actually left town soon after. I heard through grapevine he sold his condo and moved away, probably to start fresh elsewhere. Good riddance. Marcia faced the wreckage of her life daily. A marriage in shambles, children who could barely look at her, a career cut short, friends who distanced themselves, all because of her choices. That realization was perhaps the sharpest punishment of all for her. There were moments late at night when I sat alone in the quiet house and felt a pang of emptiness. Revenge is cold comfort when the life you loved has been dismantled. I knew that even as I executed my plan. I accepted that price. Still, being right didn't necessarily make me happy. It just made me right. But then I'd remind myself of the alternative, continuing in blissful ignorance while my wife laughed behind my back. No, I'd take this reality, harsh as it was, over living a lie. One evening, a month or so after everything, I found myself driving down a highway at dusk, much like that first scene of this nightmare. Only this time, I wasn't rushing home to a family waiting. I was driving to clear my head, kids safely with their grandmother for the night. The sun was melting into the horizon, painting the sky in blood orange and violet. I pulled the truck over at a scenic overlook. From there, I could see the lights of our town flickering on in the blue twilight. It looked so peaceful from afar, belying the turmoil that had occurred. I thought about the man I was before all this, trusting, content, perhaps a bit naive. That man was gone. In his place was someone a bit harder, a bit wiser, and yes, a bit lonelier. But also someone who still had purpose. Raising my kids, steering my life forward on a path I now controlled fully. As I stood there, a breeze picking up, I realized something important. I survived. They had taken so much from me, but they had not destroyed me. In fact, I felt a strange sense of freedom. I owed nothing to anyone who would hurt me like that. My future, for the first time in a long while, was truly mine to shape. Back in the truck, I found one of Evan's toys in the passenger seat, a little die-cast model of an 18-wheeler he'd left. I held it in my hand for a moment, thinking of him and his wide eyes admiring what his dad does. I knew my road ahead would be about being the best father I could be, healing myself and my children. Turning the key in the ignition, I merged back onto the highway. The radio was playing something, but I barely heard it as I focused on the lane ahead, the lines on the asphalt illuminated by my headlights. Mile after mile, I drove into the encroaching night, the engine's rumble steady beneath me. This journey, this long, painful haul, was nearly over. Revenge had been meted out, and what remained was the long road to recovery. I didn't know what exactly lay at the end of it, but I did know I was moving forward. As the town's lights dwindled in my rearview mirror, I kept my eyes on the horizon. The open road stretched out, and with it the promise of a new dawn somewhere ahead. In that thought, finally, I found a measure of peace. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.